is going to go first, and then Terry.
Oh, cool. Cup holder. Hey, everybody. My name is Eric. I am an alcoholic. That is lispy. All right, forgive my lisp. My sobriety date is November 28th of 2018. That's not my first sobriety date, but that's where I'm going to kind of tell my story to. Very grateful to be here tonight, and thank you, Patrick, for asking Terry. And then Terry turned around and asked me. It's a very interesting story, and this is kind of how this program is working for me, or has been over the last little over 2 years. Back in January, actually it was January 6th, it was the day of the insurrection or the Capitol riot, whatever. I was going through some tough times, going through some depression that I wasn't expecting in sobriety. And y'all had talked about it and warned me, and it came and knocked me out. It hit me pretty hard. So it was around those 2 days I'd called in sick to work. I had gone right in the old pattern of what my behaviors used to look like when I was drinking. My husband's here tonight, and he came up to me and said, I mean, he saw that look. He's like, what is going on? And so I was laying in bed watching all the news, and I knew that I had to just get outside and put one step in front of the other. That's what y'all said, just get out of your head and go put one step in front of the other. So I grabbed my dog Max, and I walked to the park, and I called Terry. And I was like, I've got to let you know what's going on. And we talked, and in all that moment, everything just went away. Well, not really, but enough that it was like my life is not going to come crashing down on me again. I didn't want to drink through any of that, but in the conversation, he goes, I got to ask you something. You're probably going to say no. And I was like, what? He goes, well, they do this thing called the double feature at We Are Not Saints on Saturday night. When I was asked to speak, would you like to speak with me? And I'm like, oh my God, yes, of course. It was like my whole attitude in that moment changed. And so it's been like 3 months since then. I have been traveling, and so thank you for your patience in letting me get up here, because speaking with Terry as my sponsor, I mean, there's nothing more that I can do to give back to all the things he's given to me. I do want to thank my husband for being here as well. It's the first time I've told my story in front of him, and not that matters, but just his support and what he's done for me has just been tremendous. And to have him here and to see what a special family and group this is it's awesome. I've only got 20 minutes, and I'm going to keep it tight. And I can just tell you, I was born in 1967. I'm 53 years old. I'm a Leo. I was born in Florida. I was the third of a family of four. I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina. My dad was in retail, and we moved all over the country, or all over the Southeast. Both my parents drank alcoholically. My mom is an alcoholic. She got sober in 1990. And so I was raised in a pretty upper middle class household. The story is all great on the outside, nice big corner lot, beautiful home, 4 kids, a cat, and just chaos behind closed doors. My dad and my brother fighting on Sunday dinner, and it was crazy. But in all of that, as I look back and as I continue to share my story and work with others, I'm very, very, very grateful for my life in my upbringing. I had a lot of anger and resentment built against my parents and my siblings, because they're all alcoholics too. And so getting here and being able to share my experience, strength, and hope with them today is tremendous. Growing up as a kid, I was your normal kid, but I knew I was different at a young age. I mean, I'm going to tell everything that everybody else tells. I knew I was gay probably when I was like 5 or 6. I liked playing with my sister's pom-poms, and I wanted to be a cheerleader. like her, and I did all this. I was smart. I stayed very, very busy. I loved playing video games and Star Wars figures, and I was a nerd, and so I would always find time to do those things on my own while my friends and my siblings were off getting in trouble, and so it kept me out of trouble, and I didn't want to be in trouble. I saw enough what happened with my parents, and so that's really how my life went all the way up until high school. I started exploring my sexuality around, as soon as I could get into a car and do that, and so that became a focus in my life in high school. But I didn't drink. I'd had enough working with dealing with my mom and her alcoholism, because it broke up our family. My parents separated. But when she finally got sober when I went into college, and we were all in a family counseling session, and I knew in that session that I was an alcoholic, and that as soon as I told her I was gay, that she was going to start drinking again. And so, and I just remember that so vividly, talking to the counselor there, but that didn't happen. It didn't happen. I was grateful for that, but I didn't understand, because I was just you just need to stop. If you just look at my life between that point all the way until I got sober, there was about 32 years of constant drinking. I remember speaking with a therapist, and he was like, when was the last day you didn't have a drink? And I couldn't remember. I mean, it was maybe a day when I was sick. There was a 6-month time period where, I made a commitment to Ricky that I'm going to get you off my back, so I'm going to quit drinking. And I did that, but it was a beat down of my body. And so through all that time, I had a boyfriend of 10 years when I got out of college, and that was just a very codependent, unhealthy drinking relationship. I was emotionally bankrupt even at that time, and so I took everything I could out of that relationship. Ricky and I have been together 24 years. In 22 of that, it was pretty much the same thing. I was just struggling with that part of my life, but I really tried to keep it as hidden and as secret as possible. And so it's just hard to believe in the fathom that we're still together, and and I look back in those years of my life and in the immense gratitude I have of just whatever higher power was happening or influencing my decisions, or keeping me safe, or not getting a DUI, or not losing my job up to a point. Because I kept getting promoted, life kept going. It was good, but internally I was just continuing to just struggle. And when I first started drinking in college, I knew I drank alcoholically, and I knew what an alcoholic looked like, but I didn't think I belonged. I didn't belong here. I didn't belong here at all. That was kind of how my upbringing was. But what got me into the rooms is 4 years ago, or 5 years ago, actually that's a lie. In 2013, I was fired from a job. I was there 20 years. I used to work for a company called Macaroni Grill, and they were great to me. It was a family environment, and I had a lot of fun, but it came to an end, and I saw it coming, and I didn't care. And so I left that job, got another job, barely got through it, and I decided to quit that job because my lies had kind of run out, and you kind of you call in sick enough, or you make up excuses for certain things, you kind of put yourself in a corner. So I'm like, I'm gonna move on. Moved on to another job, and I got fired from that job in 2016. And this was December 2016 during the election with Hillary and Trump. And I remember I was in bed pretty much 3 months straight. I would not even wake up in the morning. I would get up, and before Ricky got up, I would go run to the store and get something to hide in my room to drink, or just lay in bed depressed. It was that paralyzing. And I realized if I didn't make a change, or something didn't change in my life, that bad things were going to continue to happen, or I was just going I was just gonna die. I didn't know how that was gonna happen. And so I had met a young lady, her name is Deborah M. She's a friend of this group. When I worked at a restaurant company called Cheddar's, she was there, and I met her my first day at Cheddar's, and she had told me she had been she had stayed there because they were so supportive of her program. And I'm like, what program? She goes, oh, I've got 11 years sober, and she was just out about it, and I was like, holy moly! And I just stored that in my head, and I said, I'm going to call her one day. I just knew that she was going to be my lifeline, and I didn't see her for a few years, and when I had lost that last job, I woke up. I was drinking wine. I was hiding it in just like an orange cup, and I was in the bathroom. And I come out, and Ricky's drinking out of that orange cup. I'm like, oh no! Oh man, I'm busted. And it was just a look, and that was it. And I'm like, I need to get some help. So I went and got some more wine, and then I went and got another bottle of wine, and then I went to bed, and I texted her. I got a text back from Deb at 4 o'clock in the morning, and on October 16th of 2016, I met her at a park in Addison, and she came out. She had a big book, and she goes, I'm going to 12-step you. She was shaking, but she was like, we're gonna do this, and I was like, oh my gosh, and I was in a tank top and shorts, and she's like, I'm taking you a meeting, get in the car. And I'm like, I am not getting in the car. She goes, if you want to do this, you need to trust me. Like, you need to make this step, you need to trust me. Just get in the car. And so I did, and took me to the Chicago group. And we pulled up, and there's all these signs, it's like, hey, here, and there's guys in suits and people greeting. And I was like, oh my gosh. She goes, oh my God, this is like the AA, this is like the who's who of Dallas AA. And I mean, I was like, this is crazy. So I went in, and I got a sponsor there. I was told to get a sponsor. They're going to choose one for me. That group's pretty, it's pretty intense. And so I did. I started working the steps, but I kept drinking. And I did that for I did it for another couple of years, actually. But I started coming to Lambda at that time. Too, and I knew Terry. I remember seeing Patrick there first time. All of y'all. But I couldn't stop. I wanted what you had. I wanted what this fellowship was giving. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to just feel human. I wanted to have what you had, but I couldn't stop drinking. And so I fired that sponsor. Got Scott R. as a sponsor because he was gay, and I thought that was going to work out. But I kept drinking through that, did steps with him, and kept lying. So I got rid of him, and then I met Terry. And I thought Terry would be perfect, because I remember sitting at a lunch meeting with Terry, and he was telling a story about when he first came in, and his story was exactly like mine. He was in a long-term relationship and was having struggles and was in the corporate environment. And I'm like, okay, like this guy, maybe he can help me. And so I walked outside after the meeting, and I waited to see if he'd raise his hand first, and he didn't. But I was like, I'm going to ask him anyway. And I said, I was told to just ask. So I said, Terry, will you be my sponsor? And he was like, well, you know what? He said, I didn't raise my hand. And I was like, I know. And he goes, but I've also been told to always say yes. So I'll do it. And that was the start of our relationship. So we started working the steps. We would meet at Lambda in the little back closet there in the toy room. But I kept drinking, and I kept lying, and I couldn't stop. I just kept going. I kept going further south, and I didn't know how to stop. And I would come into meetings. I would just drink in the parking lot at Lambda, come into meetings, and just couldn't wait to get back out and drink again. Harry was in the back of the room and would invite me to dinner. Every time I was in there, he always invites you, hey, let's go out and have dinner. And I'm like, no, I need to go home. I need to go home to my husband. But I wouldn't. I would lie. I would go off and go to the parking lot at 7-Eleven, sit there and drink more. And that wasn't working. And my depression and my anxiety and my shame and my guilt, especially as I saw my best friend Noel come into the program like that year and just immediately get sober. And I was just like, there's something I'm not doing that's got to change. And so I started disconnecting from the program. I quit my job, and my dad had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and we were working to make some quick changes in supporting my mom. So I quit my job. I got offered a job in Orlando, and I was making a big deal. I'm moving to Orlando, and we did. We moved to Orlando to go help. I was going to go fix my family. That's what I did, and it was that November, December, when I was down there visiting. It was November 27th of 2018. I was down there. I was visiting my dad in the hospital, and I was driving home back to my hotel room where I was staying there, room 412, and I was driving back, and I could not find alcohol anywhere. Every place, there was 3 places that I would stop on the road. All the credit card machines were down. I didn't have any cash, and I was desperate. And something in that moment was like, this is absolute insanity. So I was able to find some alcohol, and I got up into my hotel room. I ordered a pizza, a bottle of wine. It never came. I called and complained, and it never came. And so I'm sitting in the room, and it's like 11:30, and I knew it was 10:30 here in Dallas, and I was like, I've got to reach out. I was like, I know I just got to reach out. So I called Noel, and he answers, hello, like sleeping. I'm like, I've been drinking. Will you stop drinking? You need to go to sleep. You need to put it down, go to sleep, and call Terry in the morning. So I did. I took that alcohol, whatever I had left, and I stuck it behind an ice machine somewhere in the hotel so I wouldn't go get it, because I knew if I put it somewhere outside my room I wouldn't. So I slept, and I got up that next morning, and I called Terry first thing. And I hadn't talked to Terry in a while. It's been a few weeks or months. Like I said, disconnected, and he's like, it's good to hear from you. How have you been? And I'm like, I'm ready. I surrendered. And well, he goes, well, you know what to do. And I'm like, what does that mean? And and I knew what it meant. I know what it means now, because he taught me, and I learned from y'all what that was, and it's not that difficult. But in that moment, I had that shift had happened, that click that Terry always like to talk about, had changed. My obsession and my want and desire and everything that had to put alcohol first, and everything, it was gone. And I got up, I walked to work that morning. It was a cold morning in Orlando, and I found a meeting, and he said, you know what to do, and we love you, is what this other thing he said. And when you hear that from a sponsor that says we love you, it's that's like the best feeling in the world, because I didn't hear just him loving me. I heard it was all y'all loving me. I could just picture everybody in Lambda just being there, and I'm like, I just had a feeling like this is going to be it. I just need to get home. I just need to get back to Orlando. But I need to get a meeting in today get back to Dallas, because we hadn't moved yet. Anyway, so I went on the little app, and I found a meeting like 0.5 miles away, and it was called Made a Beginning. I went there. The chairperson was, her name was Sally Ann, and she was a lesbian, and talk about a girlfriend. I'm like, oh my gosh, this would be like a perfect place for me to come back to. And that's what happened. That day I flew back to Dallas. It was a Friday morning. Came to the new meeting. Terry was chairing. I picked up my Desire Chip, and I haven't had a drink of alcohol since. But it was rough. My husband and I were going on a trip to New Zealand in 2 days, and I knew I had to get sobered up. And we were flying to New Zealand, and the morning we were leaving, we were flying to San Francisco. I started having DTs and sweats, and I thought it was just my normal travel anxiety. But we got on that flight to go to New Zealand, that 12-hour flight, and I thought I was going to have a heart attack, and I didn't want to scare him or anybody. I was closing my eyes. My eyes were fluttering so hard I couldn't close my eyes, and I was just like praying that there was a doctor on board, because I knew I was going to stroke out. I just knew it, and I didn't. We landed. We were walking outside, and it was cold, windy, and misty, and I can remember just getting outside, and I could just feel like this coldness all over my body, and just like the alcohol was just, I don't know. It was just like, thank God. And it was just like this feeling. And so then 2 weeks we spent there hiking and just connecting. And I found meetings there. It was painful, but it was beautiful at the same time. And Ricky we were celebrating his birthday, so every time we would get to a hotel, there'd be like a congratulations on your birthday bottle of wine, or big huge survey bar. And so Ricky quickly would call ahead and get all that stuff removed out of our room before we got there. But I got through it. And I've got like 3 or 4 minutes left, and I want to say that between that time and working the steps, I found a sponsor in Orlando to work the steps. Her name was Deborah, and we worked those steps harder than I'd ever worked the steps before. I lost the job that I had down there due to my drinking, and I didn't know what was going to happen. And obviously I came back to Dallas, but it was where I was meant to be. I was meant to be back with my best friend and with you guys and with our friends. And so it wasn't necessarily to start over, but it was me being able to come back and really get back what I'd been given. And so when I came back to Lambda, I got Terry back as my sponsor, obviously, and I remember going to lunch with him, and we picked up right where Deborah and I left off, and I was making amends, but man, my spiritual experience was flying high. I was shooting like stars and bright sunshine ray. I mean, I don't know if y'all remember, but it was really annoying, and but I didn't care. I was so proud to be back here to show you that I could get sober. I was having a spiritual experience. All those things that you said were going to happen were happening, and and I still get those moments. I love the people in this room and what this program has given me. So I do sponsor some guys now. I've been given that gift, and it is the most amazing. It is the most amazing thing to spend time with the guys that I sponsor. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but I do want to let you know that I'm still an alcoholic, and this past year has been I thought it was a great year for me because I was at home, I was able to work from home, calling a Zoom meetings, things were going fine, but that whole episode of all of that depression came up. There are still some things that I work on. I've revisited and got back to the therapist that I've been working with. I've taken way too much to chew with AA and finding a balance with my husband and my work life. And my work life was suffering, and I didn't even know it. They asked me to take one of those personality quizzes, and I was given a review a couple weeks ago, and it wasn't the most glowing review. And in this review, I wanted to share what they told me my opportunities were. So I want to put this out there. So one of them is Objectivity of Viewpoint. Your responses indicated that you're more of a sensitive person who is very aware of your own reactions and the reactions of others. This tendency has been positive and sometimes negative consequences. On the positive side, it makes you aware of your own others' needs and feelings. However, this trait can increase your hypersensitivity to criticism, and you may feel easily hurt by other people's comments or reactions. I'm an alcoholic. It's not going to change. Another one was capacity to handle pressure. You've reported that you see yourself as a person who is more easily frustrated and possibly more reactive to situations that stress for you. Many of our feelings are related to our personal outlook and expectations of the world around us. When these expectations are not met, we become disappointed, frustrated, pessimistic, or inconsistent in our feelings and moods. All of our disappointments in our lives when things don't happen the way we want, i.e., people don't react the way we expect, events turn out differently than we want, etc. However, how we handle our reaction is ultimately up to us. You can get feedback and do all these exercises and give me all these web pages and reports to read. So my boss gave me this I have come out to my boss and told her I was an alcoholic when I realized that I was not bringing my full self into work. And then she shared this with me and some feedback. And she asked me what I think of this, and I said, "This is what an alcoholic looks like." And I said, "But I have not been bringing my full self to work. And so that's gonna change." And I would never have done that before this program. And so I want to close by just, I had to share that, I thought it was fun. I wanted to close by reading something that out of Daily Reflections. This book was given to me in my old home group at the beginning by my old sponsor. And it's falling apart. This was what they used in that group for 20 years or something. But as the pages fall out, there's a spot on May 19th. And when I always open this, I always open it up to this. And I read it this morning, and I want to read it now. Giving without strings. And he well knows that his own life has been made richer as an extra dividend of giving to another without any demand for return, as Bill sees at page 69. The concept of giving without strings was hard to understand when I first came into the program. I was suspicious when others wanted to help me. I thought, what do they want in return? But I soon learned the joy of helping another alcoholic and understand why they were there for me in the beginning. My attitudes changed, and I wanted to help others. Sometimes I became anxious as I wanted them to know the joys of sobriety, that life can be beautiful. When my life is full of loving God, of my understanding, and I give that love to my fellow alcoholic, I feel a special richness that is hard to explain. And that's what I think of this man. He's given so much to not just me, but others in this room. And there's just, and my goal is, anytime I'm asked, or is there someone who can you sponsor, I raise my hand. I'll take 50 sponsees if I have to. I'm gonna give as much back to this program as I can, because to sit here and watch what happens to their lives and what I can give back, it's just amazing. So now I'm gonna hand it over to Terry. Thanks for letting me share.
I'm Terry, and I'm an alcoholic. And I'm going to get my phone up here. And I'll say in advance, I've had allergies for the last 2 weeks, and we'll see how this goes. Coughing spells are common with me right now. But anyway, and I've been sober this time since July the 23rd of 2009. That was not my first sobriety date. My first sobriety date was in January of 2002. So you can kind of imagine what happened in the meantime. Yeah, Steve was my sponsor for a while, and I thought he knew that I was doing half measures, but apparently it's pretty obvious to me that I was doing half measures. Anyway, and Eric mentioned the shift in thinking, and so I was born in 1950. That means I haven't had a birthday yet this year, so I'm coming up on 71, and so the thing that's central in my story that I want to be sure and mention tonight is that through my long life, I've had several events through my life that have been life-changing events that in one moment you're here, and in another moment I'm over here, and things are different. And Dr. Silkworth in the Doctor's Opinion talks about unless you have and I'm going to butcher it. Let's see if I did write it down. Unless a psychic change occurs in the individual, there's little chance, or no. He actually said no chance of recovery, and I have found that to be true. When I came back the last time, I started listening to some recordings of AA. I didn't know that those recordings even existed. And I was listening to Bill Wilson one time, one of our co-founders, and it was way back in the 50s, and he was at some conference, one of the international conferences, and he used the word spiritual to describe his own experience in Towns Hospital. He used the word spiritual conversion. And I'll get back to that later, but so I went and looked up I Googled it, and there was a lot of different stuff came up. But one thing that came up that struck me that nails my experience with the spirituality of AA and the shift in identity. And I want to read this to you, and I'll put spiritual experience, not not conversion, but spiritual expansion is the adoption of new beliefs that differ from the previous beliefs. It involves a new identity or a change from one identity to another. It requires the internalization of the new belief system. It implies a new reference point for one's self-identity and is a matter of belief and social structure, of both faith and affiliation. This entails a sincere avowal of the new belief system, but it may also present itself in other ways, such as an adoption into an identity group or spiritual lineage. And I've noticed it didn't say the word God in there anywhere. It talked about spirituality and a shift in thinking. And that's what I think happens. I know that's what happened to me in AA over time, sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly. For me, apparently I thought that stuff that I grew up with was all I ever needed to know about AA and sobriety. And I was, that did not prove for me. So I was born in 1950 in Dallas. When I tell the long version, I'm going like, well, back in my day, if you can imagine Dallas, Texas with no freeways. I'm old enough to remember Dallas, Texas with no freeways. When I was a kid, Central Expressway was being finished. In fact, my dad announced one day, said, we can go to McKinney and we can get on the freeway. Great, go to McKinney on the freeway. Okay, great, Dad. But anyway, I grew up in one of those religious households where I went literally from the nursery at the hospital to the nursery at church. And back in those days, in the family that I grew up in, we didn't ask whether you went to church. We asked which one you went to. And that's kind of the way it was. And the culture that I knew, that's the way it was. And so I had a very loving family. Neither of my parents were alcoholics, but there's alcoholism. If you look back and you peel back the layers, it's all through my ancestry there. But so to make this quick, so I went. So we literally went to every time that I'm one of those families where every time the church doors were open, we were there. So one of my fondest memories of my early days is that because of the way things were back in the 50s, I have a twin brother, Jerry, fraternal twin, and so we would get we were little tykes. We would get our baths on Saturday night. Yes, we actually took a Saturday night bath, and then we'd get in our jammies, and one would cuddle up with Mom, and the other one would cuddle up with Dad. And I remember I was kind of a precocious kid. I was always aware of feelings and stuff. Imagine that. And but I remember, snuggling up to one of my parents and thinking, I'm in a safe place. This is safe. I am warm, safe, protected. All is good, because we're sitting on the sofa and we're watching the Saturday night westerns on TV in the 50s. Black and white, Gunsmoke and Paladin and all those things. Anyway, so I had that memory, and so life goes on. And one Sunday, so I'm still a little kid, and this one of these shifts in thinking happens. At the end of every service, there was the pastor down at the front, and you know what he's asking. He said, "Come down and do the deal." And my little heart was tugging. I was going like, I know I need to do this. I know I need to do this. And so, but one Sunday evening, I was just terrified, absolutely petrified with fear. But but in spite of the fear, I found my feet stepping out into the aisle and walking down that aisle. And I don't want to get into the religious aspect of that, but what I experienced that night was, in spite of this terrifying fear, I stepped out in the aisle and walked and did the thing that you were supposed to do. But even as a child, I distinctly remember the next day I felt different. Something was different in my perception of the world. And so anyway, enough of that. So I went, life continued. I was one of those kids that always felt on the outside looking in. Jerry and I were born in August. We started school when we were 6. We started in September. So we'd been preemies when we were born. So we were the smallest, we were the youngest, and I'm always on the outside, feeling less than. But other than that, life was pretty normal. So So we go through school, graduate, nothing special happens. And so I get to college, and I'm going to school, and I've been there a while. And one morning, one of my instructors walks in, and I was already 21. I think I was going to UT Arlington, and one of my instructors walked in, and she said, "Well, I had an interesting weekend this morning. I went to a gay bar over in Dallas." Boom, my little ears, boom, boom, and I got out my pen, and I was ready to take notes, and so she said she went to a club over in Dallas, and it was called the Bayou Club. Now, no one in this room probably remembers the first Bayou Club. There was Bayou Landing, and there was other clubs with, Old Plantation and all that, but this was the Bayou Club, and it was over on Rollins, and the building's gone now, and it was a big old southern mansion, white pillars and the whole thing. And so I started, I got out my telephone book. We had telephone books back then, and found the address, and I started stalking the Bayou Club. I got parked outside and going like, watching all the cute young guys walk in. I'm going, they're gay, they're gay, they're gay. So one night, petrified with fear, I open my door and I start walking. In spite of the fear, start walking. And so I went in, and I had my first legal drink. I had one can of beer before I was 21. And bought that. The only thing I knew to order was a Tom Collins. So I said, I'll have a Tom Collins. And I don't even know what that is today. But anyway, they served me one. And so the lights went down, and the mirror ball starts going. And the song comes up, Hold Me, Thrill Me, Kiss Me, 1950s. And I see these boys out there spinning on the dance floor, and I'm going like, okay, I have arrived. And it was earth-shattering. And I did things that night that I'd been wanting to do for a very, very long time. And it was earth-shattering. That I walked in there as a closeted, frightened young man, 21 years old, and the next day I was a different person. And it shook me for several days, that the impact of how my life was going to change, because I saw this whole new world. Anyhow, so and I drank for most of the next 20 years. I drank like the rest of our community seems to, bars, parties, never drinking alone, never drinking at home. But there was a time in the 80s where I had a lot of situational anxiety going on, and I started drinking on a daily basis. And that, as you can imagine, that's just started increasing. By the late 90s, 2000, I was crossing that line of no return, and it scared me to death. And so started having consequences, and so I came into my very first AA meeting in January of 2002. Okay, so I stuck around for a while. I did the half measures stuff. Who starts out to do half measures? Nobody. If you ask, are you just doing half measures? Oh no, I'm not doing half measures. But I was. I really hadn't been that page 30 in our book that says admitted to my innermost self. That really hadn't happened. So I relapsed for about 4 or 5 years, and when I came back in 2009, now I had never experienced a blackout when I walked into my first AA meeting. I heard you all talk about blackouts. I didn't know. Okay, I know about passing out. I don't know about blacking out. When I came back in 2009, if I started drinking tonight, say it's 7:45, I'd be in a blackout before 8:30, and that blackout would last 3-4 days nonstop. So anyway, I was in a pretty bad shape when I came back in 2009, and so things changed. I was desperate, and I started being willing to do stuff that I'd never been willing to do before. And one of the things was I started listening to. I found through somebody said something in a meeting about the Joe and Charlie tapes, and I found those, went online and found those, but I found a whole lot of other stuff. And as I said, I was listening then, shortly after that, I was listening to Bill Wilson, because I found out that there was all this old stuff out there of the old timers out there. And I was listening to him, and when he said this thing about his experience in Towns Hospital, he said about his spiritual. And he almost apologized for using the word conversion because it was so tied to all of the religiosity and stuff, and all the religious stuff. But he said, I'm going to use the word anyway. And I don't think he ever put that in writing anywhere. But when he told this story, he talked about this word, and he said spiritual conversion. And I'm going, and that stuff that I grew up with came rushing back into my head, and it bothered me. It really. In fact, I was driving, and I pulled off the road, and I backed up the CD because I was listening to CDs. I wasn't streaming. This was, what, 12 years ago, 11 years ago, and so I backed it up and I listened to it again, and I mean, it just swept over me, this feeling, and so I struggled for the next few days. I'm going like, what was about that, him saying that word that struck me so hard? And it finally came to me. I'm going, surrender. I finally understand the level of surrender that I'm going to have to go to. I mean, I was back and I was going to meetings, but I thought that coming back and doing exactly the same stuff that I'd been doing when I was relapsing was all I needed to do. And I realized that's not nearly enough, Terry. You got to be in the middle of this thing. And so a lot of things happened. I started following a guy that was taking meetings to treatment centers. I had been to rehab once or twice, and one of the psychiatrists there once told me, he said, "You've been going to AA a while." He says, "Do you do those 5 things?" I'm going, yeah. He goes, what are they? And I managed to struggle out 5 things, but I realized I'd not been doing any of that stuff. So, calling my sponsor, going to meetings, literature, connecting with other people, praying in the morning, not asking to be helped to stay sober today, asking my higher power, God, whatever the word is that you want to use, take this from me. I have no power to do it. And I started doing that anyway. So I really got, when I found out that all this historical stuff, I'm a history nut anyway, and when I found out all this historical stuff was out there, I got really in depth with the history of AA, so I learned about people. It's kind of like social media. You find one connection, and then you see all these connections out here around it. So I found out about Ernie Kurtz doing the history of AA and the spirituality of AA. Harry Thibault talking about the ego, and he did a lot of studies on alcoholism and the incredible resilience of our ego and all of that. And so I understand now today that there's so much more that's spiritual about this program than I ever thought in my life. But once again, hearing Bill Wilson say that word conversion, and that hitting me that once and for all my mind had shifted from a relapser to staying sober. And what I've realized about that is that in the spiritual experience at the back of our book, the Appendix 2, it talks about that AA's description of spirituality, and it ends with honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And so what I know now is that that overwhelming sense of surrender that I got that time when I was listening to that led to willingness to do all the things that I had heard y'all say that you were doing, but probably weren't going to be necessary for Terry. And also what I realize now is that when I do an action in spite of what my brain is telling me, I've got most of you who know me know I've got this alter ego, this alcoholic that I call Larry, and Larry would tell me when I was relapsing all those years, Larry would tell me that I'm smart. I'm a really smart guy. Just like like Eric, I'm a smart guy. That I already know the result of any action that is suggested to me before I do it. So why bother? And what I realized is that when I had enough willingness to take action in spite of that thought, the experience that I had actually doing the action was way different than Larry had told me it was. And that experience changed me. And so I tell that to people in treatment centers when we go to those now. And I was going like, I've got to be willing to do the action regardless of what my brain tells me. And the experience will change me. So I know today that because of you all, because of sponsorship, one last thing is that, there's a place in our book that talks about sponsoring other people, and it says, this is an experience you must not miss. And that is so, so, so true. Because of this program, because of you all, because of doing the 5 things on a daily basis, I stay in a place where I'm safe and protected, just like that little boy that sat beside cuddled up to mom and dad. And I love you all for it. Thanks.